Hi, I'm Ellen from the Chili Dog. We're nearing the end of the Chasing Butterflies knit along. I've finished the body of my shawl and now it is time for me to work the edging, which is going to be created with wrap and turn short rows. Since this is a technique that may be new to some knitters, I'd like to give you just a quick demonstration. The first 8 rows of the edging are a sort of setup. The next 8 rows will be repeated across the entire width of the shawl. I'm only going to focus on the right side rows, especially how to create and handle the wrap and turns at the end of each row. Because all the wrong side rows of the edging are just purled, and you can handle that. And the pattern on the right side rows of the edging is just filled with stitches that you've already encountered as you were knitting the shawl. But before we start the edging, don't forget when you are working your last wrong side row of the shawl, when you get done, you need to cast on 1 stitch using a backward loop cast on. And I'll show you how to do that really quick here. Here's your working yarn. You're just going to loop it around your thumb. Bring your knitting needle up under that front strand. I'm going to hold it in place here with my index finger, drop my thumb out of the loop, and then pull on the working yarn, and it tightens that stitch up. We'll turn things over to the right side and get started on the edging. For row 1 of the edging, I've just knit across 12 stitches, and then I'm going to do a wrap and a turn. To wrap and turn, my yarn is at the back after I have knit. I'm going to slip 1 stitch purlwise. I'm going to wrap the yarn around the side of the stitch, so I'm bringing it forward between my 2 needles. I'll slip that stitch back to my left hand needle. I'm going to continue the wrap in the same direction, bringing the yarn now back between the 2 needles. And then the turn, I'm just going to turn my work over so I can go in the opposite direction. And now I'll work my wrong side row and just purl across those 12 stitches. Before I start row 3, let's take a look here at the first wrap and turn. And what happened when we wrap that stitch is it makes this little collar around your unworked stitch. And it looks a little bit unusual if you're not used to seeing it, but that's exactly what's supposed to happen. So now I'm going to work in pattern across row 3. The pattern ends 1 stitch before that wrapped stitch. So now I need to do another wrap and turn. So again, my yarn is already at the back. I'm going to slip the stitch purlwise, wrap the yarn around the stitch by bringing it forward between the 2 needles, slip the stitch back to the left hand needle, continue wrapping in the same direction by bringing my yarn back between the 2 needles, and then turn things over so I can purl across the next wrong side row. As I'm getting ready to start row 5, you'll notice at the end of the row, here's the first wrapped stitch, and here's the second wrapped stitch. So for row 5, again, I'm just going to knit in pattern across the row. The pattern stops again before that second wrapped stitch. So now it's time for another wrap and turn. Slip purlwise, wrap the yarn between the needles, slip the stitch back, Finish the wrap and turn the work over to work the next purl row. For row 7, I'm simply going to knit across 9 stitches. Again, the pattern stops right before the previously wrapped stitch. I'll do another wrap and turn. So slip, wrap, slip, keep wrapping, and then turn things over, and then purl across the next wrong side row. Row 9 is our bind off row and where we're going to encounter these 1, 2, 3, 4 wrapped stitches once again. So we start the row by binding off 8 stitches, and nothing fancy here. We're just going to use a plain bind off for those 8 stitches. So you start by knitting the first 2 and then bind off 1 stitch by passing the first stitch up over the top of the second. So knit a stitch and bind off number 2. Knit a stitch and bind off number 3. Knit 4, knit 5, knit 6, knit 7, knit number 8. So now we're at those 4 wrapped stitches. So to work those, all we're going to do is take our right needle, go up under the front of the wrap, knitwise into the stitch, and then knit the stitch and the wrap together. And then drop the stitch off the left needle. And again, go up under the front wrap, knitwise through the stitch, knit the stitch and the wrap together, and drop the stitch off. Up through the wrap, knitwise through the stitch, knit them together, and drop it off. And our final wrapped stitch, up through the wrap, knitwise through the stitch, knit them together, and then drop the stitch off. So now we have 5 stitches on our right hand needle. I'm going to continue row number 9 and knit 7 more stitches. It's time to start our wrap and turns again. So just like before, my yarn is at the back. I'll slip a stitch purlwise. I don't need these markers anymore, so as I reach them when I'm doing my edging, you can just drop them off and you are done with them. Get it out of the way here. I need to wrap that stitch so the yarn comes forward between the needles. Slip the wrapped stitch back to the left hand needle. Finish the wrap in the same direction by bringing the yarn back between the needles. Turn things over and then purl across the wrong side. And now that you know how to make the wraps at the end of each row and how to work the wraps in that bind off row, You should be good to go. I've worked a couple more repeats of the edging just so that you can see how these short rows are creating this nice little sawtooth around the edge. A couple things to remember as you're working your edging. Don't fret if it seems like the edging is curling up and maybe looks a little bit sloppy, because all of that is going to work out and flatten out when you block your shawl. Also, pay attention to your tension as you're binding off your stitches and as you're making your wrap and turns. This is supposed to be a calm, relaxing project. There's no need to strangle your stitches. So maintain an even tension, not necessarily a tight tension as you're working your edging. I hope that you have enjoyed the Chasing Butterflies shawl KAL as much as I have. And also a big thank you to my friends at Makers Mercantile for their collaboration and for creating the fantastic project kits that we've been using. I'd love to see your finished shawl. You can share pictures in the Chasing Butterflies KAL thread in the Makers Mercantile group on Ravelry, or go ahead and post a picture on Instagram and make sure to tag us at the Chili Dog and tag my friends at Makers Mercantile. Until we stitch again, happy knitting.